Hi, today I'm going to show you a different approach to sketching. It's called the value blocking method. It's a wonderful method to approach complicated subjects like these that has lots and lots of details. Can you imagine drawing out every leaf, every twig, every branch? I mean, my goodness. So the key idea here is to simplify things. I begin using watercolor to block out the values of elements without details in the scene.
Hi, Mr. Tian. Could you talk a little bit about the tools that you're using?
Sure thing, Minetta. It's always a pleasure to have you ask me questions.
Thank you.
Okay, this is a small watercolor set that I improvised for quick sketching outdoors. This is a brush they call water brush pen. You can fill it up with water inside. It's a very convenient tool because every time you need water, you just squeeze water out, and when you want to wash it, squeeze more water out. It's a cheap brush, good for sketching because the bristles are hard enough to lift the pigments off the color pen. On the colors that I use, I chose primarily the browns since the ink in the fountain pen is walnut. I intentionally limited the colors in the set to 5, and there are 2 sets here. And when I mix the colors, they should provide me a range from the warmer to the cooler tones. I have included the name of the colors here for your reference. Feel free to create your own. Another tool that I use is an art fountain pen. Now this pen has an angled tip and is very flexible in creating thick and thin lines. I use walnut ink because it's very expressive as well as it doesn't clog easily. Okay, let's get back to our sketching. I begin blocking using values about 4 or 5 for areas that are darker in shade. Just keep things light at this point in time because things will shift around as you figure out the composition. Essentially, you are figuring out the value structure in the sketch. So if you put in very dark values at this moment, those of 8, 9, and 10, the position of the elements are locked in and becomes very difficult to adjust.
Why would you need to shift them?
Very good question. You might not have noticed the size, position, colors, brightness, and the shapes are relative to how we look at them.
I don't think I understand what you're saying. My teacher gives us these printed pictures and asks us to draw using the grid. The position of things are all fixed on the grid, isn't it?
Now that's the difference between sketching live versus sketching based on a photograph. Let me give you a crude example using a camera. Shift the focus of the camera from left to right. Did you notice that the width of the sliding doors changed?
Oh wow, I never noticed it.
Yeah, we take a lot of things for granted because a lot of art are being taught using photographs these days. We are conditioned to believe that what we observe should be a constant, but it's not. I will talk about the difference between perspective drawing and perceptual drawing in a separate video if there's interest. Do let me know in the comments, as well as any other thing you would like to find out.
Are you saying that when we are sketching, it's a form of training to resensitize the way we look at the world?
Pretty much so. But if you sketch with your eyes wide closed, then the world will be a conceptual constant. Now that I have done the value blocking for the central part of the scene, I use that to value block the rest of the scene. So all the rest of the elements take reference from the chosen focus. In other words, the rest of the surrounding elements are observed with the focus maintained in the central area instead of shifting the focus away from the central area to the individual parts of the scene. So the photograph provided here is a poor representation of what my eyes actually see. I revisit the central focus area from time to time to advance the value structure, especially the darker values. Remember what I said about not overworking the values too early in the game? That left me with a lot of room to attend to the darker values. Remember, you're just using the values to block in the general shapes at this point. Refrain from going into details.
I have the side question. Do you feel the pressure of people not understanding what you're doing?
Why that question, Inata?
Because in school, if I were to do this, people will ask me, "What are you doing?" So I can't imagine you doing this in public, under public scrutiny. They may think that you can't draw.
I see where you're coming from. One of my students told me this. Since sketching in public, my self-confidence grew. I no longer care about what others think when I'm drawing. I just do what I need to do. Anyway, I doubt they could do half of what I can do. I thought that's an excellent way of putting it, isn't it? Focus on your own development. Your consciousness should be on your own practice, not on what other people think of you. And if you do it right, when you're done, others will say, "Oh, that's what you're doing? Yeah, so duh, right?" Let's pull back a little and see what I'm doing. There's a kind of flow among the branches across the entire length of the panoramic scene, and it brings the gaze across the whole canvas in a very interesting way. There's a nice rhythm to it that I like. And as the gaze moved down to the ground, I find a different rhythm that I needed to respond to. So the articulation of what is on the ground should look different from the canopy or the foliage above. When you sketch or draw, there's a lot of creative problem solving you need to do. So when you make mistakes, it's no big deal. Just focus on finding solutions. In establishing the value structure, you're constantly working with contrasts. In some areas, the contrast will be stronger, and in some areas, weaker. And the contrast can be value contrast, rhythm contrast, scale contrast, shapes contrast, and pay attention to the contrast in terms of details. Okay, the value structure is more or less established. So we shall proceed to phase 2 of the sketching. Hereon, we shall use the fountain pen to work on the details. Remember the pointer about contrast? So for areas that are very busy with lots of details, the area surrounding it should be more relaxed.
Oh wow, I can see the trees and branches forming. How much detail should I put in before it gets too much?
This is a little bit challenging to explain. The details that you put in should be fun to look at and provides just enough information for something to be recognizable. So on top of things such as lighting, texture, scale, shapes, and etc., it should be in a dance with all the elements in the picture. That dance is the dance of life. It speaks of the beautiful relationship that everything has with everything around it.
Are you going to tell me again that this comes through practice?
You are so smart.
Is your fountain pen dancing as well?
You noticed, did you? I constantly turn and twist the fountain pen to vary the contact point of the nib to create line variations.
How do you develop this huge repertoire of expressions? Oh, I know what you're gonna say. Practice, 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 right?
Yes, but practice meaningfully. The practices doesn't have to be big in scale. For example, draw trees, different types of trees. Draw different types of shrubs. Try different scribbles and see what represents what best. If you do that every day for 2 weeks, you'll be pleasantly surprised by the variety of expressions you have by the end of just 2 weeks. But strangely, in art, most people don't practice like musicians, dancers, sportsmen, etc. do.
I admit, I'm one of them. So what should I do if I want to practice?
Tell you what, I will create a video on some of these practices that you can do at home to improve your expressive language. There are simple to do exercises that only requires about 10 to 15 minutes of your time per day. By the way, you notice that once you have the values blocked, the details just need to be light touches. Oops, I think I ran out of ink. Yep, it's empty.
Would you like to use my fountain pen that I use for calligraphy? But the ink is black though.
Okay, let me try. Oops, the ink is definitely much darker. And the nib, I realized, is more flat. So I can't rotate the pen because ink would not flow. Okay, I need to make a lot of adjustment because the black changed the value structure in my original blocking. No matter, I'll just deal with it. So that's it for today's demo. In summary, this method works very well for subjects that are very complicated. First do the value blocking, then the details, and finally the unifying touches. Hope you enjoyed it. Watch out for my next video.
Thank you.